I sat across from my lawyer, intending to sign over my life's savings. But he froze and whispered that I should not include my son. I thought he was mistaken until 3 in the morning today. Standing in the freezing hallway, I heard my own child laughing with his wife about how naive I was. They think I am asleep, but I have never been more awake. The betrayal stings worse than the winter cold, yet it fuels a fire I thought had died years ago. My name is Evelyn Marrow. I am 58 years old. And until tonight, I believed that the grey mist rolling off the Atlantic into the town of Greybridge Haven was a blanket of comfort rather than a shroud. I have lived a life defined by hard work and quiet sacrifices, convinced that if I gave enough of myself to the world, it would eventually give something back. I was wrong. It started at 3 in the morning. The house was usually silent, settled deep into the damp earth of the coast, but a low murmur pulled me from my sleep. It was not the wind rattling the window panes. It was human. The sound drifted up through the floorboards, a low-frequency rumble that felt intrusive in the sanctity of my own home. I sat up, clutching the quilt to my chest. The air in the bedroom was biting cold, the kind of chill that settles in your bones and refuses to leave. I slipped out of bed, my bare feet making no sound on the carpet. I moved toward the hallway. A thin blade of yellow light sliced across the darkness at the top of the stairs, coming from the kitchen below. The murmuring clarified into voices. I froze. It was Travis, my son, and his wife, Melanie. I should have called out. I should have asked why they were awake at such an ungodly hour. But something in the tone of their voices stopped me. It was not the hushed whisper of two people in love, nor was it the concern of a family discussing a crisis. It was sharp, jagged, and dripping with contempt. "She has no idea," Travis said. His voice was steady, lacking any warmth. "Mom is... well, she is just happy to have us here. She wouldn't look twice at a document if I told her it was for her own good." I pressed my back against the wall, the plaster cool against my skin. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. "I don't know." "Travis," Melanie replied, the clinking of a glass against a bottle punctuating her sentence. "She asked about the savings account last week. If she checks the balance..." "She won't check," Travis interrupted, his voice dripping with arrogance. "You know how she is. She is pathetic, really, too naive. She thinks family means loyalty. She is so easy to exploit that it is almost boring." The words hit me with the physical force of a blow. Easy to exploit. The phrase hung in the stagnant air of the hallway. I stood paralyzed in the shadows, staring at the dust motes dancing in that sliver of light. I wanted to scream. I wanted to march down those stairs and demand to know when my son, the boy I had nursed through fevers and held through nightmares, had turned into a predator. Instead, I remained motionless. If I moved, I felt I might shatter into 1,000 irreparable pieces. My mind reeled back to my youth in northern Wisconsin, to the biting winters where we burned furniture to keep warm. I had scraped and clawed my way out of that poverty. I had worked until my hands were raw, so that Travis would never know that kind of desperation. I thought I had outrun the cruelty of the world. I thought I was safe. Who did I raise? The question echoed in the cavern of my mind. I listened to them laugh softly, a conspiratorial sound that made my stomach turn. The sharp sting of betrayal began to dull, replaced by a vast, terrifying emptiness. It was a void where my trust used to be. I looked down at my hands in the dark. They looked like strangers' hands. I stepped back into my room and closed the door with agonizing slowness, ensuring the latch did not click. I climbed back into the cold bed and stared at the ceiling. They thought I was the same Evelyn Marrow who went to sleep 5 hours ago. They were wrong. As the first grey light of dawn began to bleed into the sky over Greybridge Haven, I lay in silence, nursing a seed of suspicion that was rapidly taking root in the darkness. The morning sun that filtered through the kitchen blinds felt like an insult. It was too bright and too cheerful for a woman who had spent the previous night mourning the living. I stood by the coffee maker and gripped the ceramic mug until my knuckles turned white, forcing a smile onto my face that felt like a tight mask. I had to play the part of the oblivious, aging mother. I had to be the Evelyn they mocked, not the Evelyn who knew. Travis walked into the kitchen at 7 o'clock. My son is 34 years old now, a man with broad shoulders and the dark hair of a father he barely remembers. He moved around the island with a practiced efficiency, pouring himself a cup of coffee without glancing in my direction. He was right there, yet he felt more distant than a stranger passing on the street. "Morning, Mum," he said. The greeting was flat. It was a reflex, devoid of affection. He did not look me in the eye. He stared at his phone, scrolling through emails, shielding himself with the glowing screen. "Good morning, Travis," I replied, my voice trembling slightly. I hoped he would interpret it as the frailty of age rather than the suppression of rage. "Did you sleep well?" "Fine," he muttered. "Just busy day ahead." I watched him take a sip of the coffee I had brewed. Suddenly, the image of the man before me dissolved, replaced by a memory that always lived just beneath the surface of my mind. I saw a 4-year-old boy clinging to my leg in the slushy snow, sobbing so hard he could barely breathe because he was terrified to walk into the daycare center. I remembered the weight of his small body and the desperate way he needed me. That was back when it was just the two of us against the world. His father had left us with nothing but a stack of unpaid bills and a hollow apology. To keep a roof over our heads, I had taken a job at the North Pine Social Services Agency. I worked there for 25 years. I remembered the double shifts and the nights I drove home in blizzards with the heater in my old sedan broken, my fingers numb against the steering wheel. I did it all so I could afford to buy Travis the hot meals he loved and the toys he pointed at in the store windows. I wore the same coat for 10 years so he would never have to feel the sting of poverty that had defined my own childhood. I looked at the man in the suit standing in my kitchen. "When did you die?" I wondered. When did the boy who cried for his mother become this cold creature who plots against her? Melanie entered the room a moment later. She did not even acknowledge my presence. She breezed past me to get to the refrigerator, as if I were a piece of furniture, a coat rack standing in the corner. She looked at Travis and tapped her fingernails against the granite countertop. "We need to call the broker by noon," Melanie said, her voice lowered but audible in the quiet room. Travis finally looked up from his phone. He shot a quick, nervous glance at me, then looked back at his wife. "Not now. Mel. Later." Melanie rolled her eyes and leaned in close to him, assuming I was too old or too absorbed in my toast to hear. "Stop worrying. She doesn't have a clue. Just wait a little longer, and everything will be ours." The sentence hung in the air, suspended in the aroma of roasted coffee. Everything will be ours. I took a bite of my toast, though it tasted like sawdust. I chewed slowly, forcing myself to swallow. The suspicion that had been a vague shadow the night before now solidified into a terrifying certainty. They were not just waiting for me to die. They were impatient. They were planning something active, something immediate. I looked at the house I had paid for with decades of sweat and sacrifice. And then I looked at my son. I realized then that the greatest threat to my future was not illness or old age. It was the fruit of my own womb. The air in Mr. Walton's office always smelled of old paper and lemon furniture polish. It was a scent that usually brought me comfort, a reminder of stability in a world that often felt like it was spinning too fast. Mr. Walton had been my lawyer for over 30 years. He had helped me through the paperwork when my husband left, and he had helped me organize the small inheritance my mother left behind. He was a man of few words, characterized by his stoic demeanor and the ticking of the grandfather clock that stood like a sentinel in the corner of the room. I sat in the leather chair opposite his massive mahogany desk, smoothing the fabric of my skirt with nervous hands. I had come here with a singular purpose, one that I thought would bring me peace of mind. I want to finalize my will. Mr. Walton, I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. I want to ensure that everything goes to Travis. The house, the savings, my pension benefits. I want it all explicitly under his name. I expected him to nod, to pick up his fountain pen and begin scratching away at the yellow legal pad as he always did. I expected the efficient hum of bureaucracy. Instead, Mr. Walton went completely still. He did not reach for his pen. He did not open a file. He just looked at me. And for the first time in 3 decades, I saw something in his eyes that terrified me. It was pity. The silence in the room grew heavy, pressing against my eardrums. The ticking of the clock seemed to grow louder, marking the seconds of a life I was about to lose control over. "Evelyn," he said finally. His voice was low, barely above a whisper. "Is there a problem with the paperwork?" I asked, leaning forward. He took a deep breath and leaned across the desk, his hands clasped tightly together. "Don't include him. He is up to something not right." The words did not make sense at first. They floated in the air like dust motes, refusing to settle. I blinked, waiting for the punchline, waiting for him to tell me he was speaking about someone else. What I managed to choke out: "Travis, he is my son. He lives in my house. What could he possibly be doing?" "Mr." Walton looked toward the closed door of his office as if checking for eavesdroppers. When he looked back at me, his expression was grave. "I cannot violate attorney-client privilege regarding other matters I have seen in passing, nor can I speak on things that are not yet public record. But I am your friend. Evelyn, do not sign that house over to him. You have to tell me." I pleaded, my voice rising. "If you know something, tell me. I can't say everything." He replied, shaking his head slowly. "But you must prepare yourself. Go to the bank. Today. Check your accounts. Request your tax transcripts. Look at the deed to your home. The deed I whispered. It is in my safe. Check it," he insisted, "and check the county recorder's office." I sat back in the chair, feeling as though the floor had dissolved beneath me. A cold numbness started in my fingertips and spread to my chest. I had come here to secure my son's future, and instead, I was being told to protect myself from him. Why, I asked, my voice breaking. Why would he do this, Mr. Walton did not answer the question. He simply looked at me with a profound sadness. There are things happening, Evelyn. Things that go beyond simple greed. Just promise me you will look. I left his office in a daze. The town of Greybridge Haven was swallowed by the afternoon fog, a thick white mist that obscured the ocean and turned the streets into ghosts of themselves. I walked to my car, my keys jangling in my hand, but I could not bring myself to unlock the door. Up until this moment, I had thought my son was merely ungrateful. I thought he was selfish and influenced by a wife who did not like me. I could handle disrespect. I could handle a lack of love. But this was different. This was active. This was calculated. Mr. Walton's warning replayed in my mind like a broken record. He is up to something. I realized then that I was not dealing with a rebellious child. I was dealing with a stranger who wore my son's face. The hurt that had been throbbing in my chest since the night before began to curdle into something else. It was fear. A deep, primal fear that the safety I had built for myself was actually a house of cards, and someone had already pulled the bottom card out while I was sleeping. A giant question mark attached itself to every memory I had of the last few months, and as I started the engine, I knew I would not find peace until I found the answer. I locked the door to my study and pulled the heavy velvet curtains shut. My hands were trembling so violently that it took me 3 tries to type the password into my laptop. The screen glowed with a blue light that felt harsh against my tired eyes. Mr. Walton's warning was screaming in my ears. I navigated to my bank's website, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I clicked on the transaction history for my primary savings account. The numbers stared back at me, alien and terrifying. $3,000, I whispered to the empty room. $500 at a liquor store. $2,000 transferred to... What is this? I squinted at the screen. There were transfers to an account labeled TM Consulting, Travis Marrow. My stomach lurched. I scrolled further back. It was not just my savings. There was a credit card listed on my profile that I had never applied for. It was a platinum card with a limit of $20,000, and it was nearly maxed out. I clicked on the digital copy of the application form. There, at the bottom, was my signature. But it was not my signature. The loops on the E were too wide, and the slant was wrong. It was a forgery. But it was a forgery done by someone who had spent a lifetime watching me write checks for school lunches and field trips. It was Travis's hand trying to be mine. I printed everything. The printer whirred and spat out page after page of betrayal. Then I remembered the physical files in the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet, the ones I kept for the house. I pulled out the deed folder. Inside, beneath the original title, was a document I had never seen before. It was a modification to the mortgage, a refinancing agreement that pulled $50,000 of equity out of the home I had paid off 4 years ago. I scanned the lines until my eyes snagged on a phrase that made the room spin. Travis Marrow, acting as guardian of the estate. Guardian. I choked out. I am not an invalid. I dropped the paper as if it were burning hot. I looked around the study. The familiar smell of old books and lavender potpourri suddenly felt suffocating. This house was no longer my sanctuary. It was a cage. They were not just stealing from me. They were erasing me. My mind raced back to the last few weeks. I remembered Travis standing in the hallway, talking low into his cell phone. I had asked him who it was, and he had smiled that plastic smile and said he was discussing financial planning for his future. He was planning his future. All right. He was financing it with my life. A knock at the front door made me jump. I shoved the papers under the desk blotter and went to answer it. It was Martha, my neighbour of 20 years. She held a casserole dish, but her eyes were filled with a strange, pitying concern. "Evelyn," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "I just wanted to bring this over. Melanie mentioned that that you have been having trouble cooking lately." "Trouble cooking?" I asked, my voice rising in disbelief. "I cooked a roast for them 2 days ago." Martha looked at the floor, shifting her weight uncomfortably. "Oh, well, that is good to hear." Melanie was so worried at the block party. She said you were forgetting things, that you left the stove on all night and wandered into the street. I felt the blood drain from my face. She said you are not yourself," Martha whispered, reaching out to pat my arm. "She said they are looking into assisted living options for your safety." I stared at Martha, but I was seeing the entire picture click into place like the tumblers of a lock, the murmurs at night, the pitying looks from the cashier at the grocery store, the forged signature, the title of guardian. "Thank you for the casserole." "Martha," I said, my voice sounding hollow and distant. I am very tired right now." I closed the door and leaned against it, sliding down until I hit the floor. They were not just stealing money. They were building a narrative. They were painting a picture of a senile, incompetent old woman who needed to be managed. If they could convince the courts that I was mentally unfit, Travis would not just be a thief. He would be my legal keeper. He would have total control over every cent I owned. And he would have the power to put me away in a home where no one would listen to my protests. "They want to bury me," I said into the silence of the hallway. "They want to bury me while I am still alive." The fear that had gripped me earlier evaporated, burned away by a white-hot flash of clarity. I was not senile. I was not helpless. And I was certainly not going to let my son turn me into a ghost in my own life. The rain in Greybridge Haven was relentless that afternoon. It battered the roof like 1,000 angry fists, matching the tempest that was raging inside my chest. I sat in the armchair in the living room, staring at the grey wash of the world outside, feeling the weight of my own stupidity pressing down on me. I had let them in. I had cooked for them. I had loved them while they sharpened their knives. For an hour, I allowed myself to break. I wept until my throat was raw, mourning the son I thought I had and the future I had lost. But as the tears dried on my cheeks, a voice from the past cut through the sound of the rain. It was my mother's voice, sharp and unsentimental, echoing from a winter 40 years ago. "No one saves you but yourself, Evelyn." She had said it when my first love left me, and she had said it when the bank threatened to take our farm. I sat up straight. The trembling in my hands ceased. I was Evelyn Marrow. I had survived poverty, abandonment, and 25 years of social work in the grim corners of North Pine. I would not let myself be turned into a victim by a boy I had toilet trained. A cold, hard resolve settled over me. If they wanted a war, I would give them one. But I would not fight it with shouting matches or tears. I would fight it with paper and ink. I spent the next 3 days moving like a ghost in my own home. When Travis and Melanie were at work, I went to war. I raided the recycling bin for discarded bank notices. I photographed the forged mortgage documents with a disposable camera I bought 2 towns over to avoid leaving a digital trail on my phone. I printed every unauthorized transaction, highlighting the dates and times. Then, I took the biggest risk of all. I bought a small, voice-activated recorder. I waited until they left for dinner on Friday night. My heart hammered against my ribs as I taped the device to the underside of the coffee table in the living room, right where they always sat to drink their wine and complain about their jobs. That night, I lay in bed with my door locked, listening to the muffled sounds of their return. I did not sleep. The next morning, as soon as they left for the gym, I retrieved the device and played it back. The audio was grainy, but their voices were unmistakable. "We need to push the hearing up." Melanie's voice hissed from the tiny speaker. She is looking at us differently. I don't like it. Relax. Mel, Travis replied, the sound of ice clinking in a glass accompanying his words. The doctor is already lined up to testify. Once we have the competency ruling, her assets are frozen. She can look at us however she wants from the nursing home. I pressed the stop button. My hand was shaking, not from fear, but from a rage so pure it felt like white heat. They were not just stealing my money. They were planning to lock me away. Every word they spoke was a nail in their own coffin, and I was holding the hammer. I drove to Mr. Walton's office on Monday morning. I did not make an appointment. I marched past his receptionist and threw a heavy manila envelope onto his desk. It landed with a dull thud. Mr. Walton looked up, startled, his reading glasses slipping down his nose. "Evelyn, what is this?" "It is the truth," I said, my voice steady and hard. "It is the bank statements, the credit card applications I never signed, and a recording of them conspiring to have me committed." Mr. Walton opened the envelope. He sifted through the photographs and the transcripts I had painstakingly written out by hand. He stopped at the page where I had transcribed Travis's threat about the nursing home. He read it twice. When he looked up at me, the pity was gone from his eyes, replaced by a profound respect. "My God," he whispered. "You did all this in 3 days. I did not have a choice." I replied, "They want to take my life. Mr. Walton, I am just taking it back." He closed the file and placed his hands on top of it. He looked at me with a grim smile. "You are stronger than I thought, Evelyn. Much stronger." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "If you have this much, we don't just defend you. We trap them. I know a way to handle this. It will require nerves of steel. But if you do it, they will never see it coming. Tell me what to do." I said, "I am ready." Mr. Walton sat behind his desk, his face pale and drawn. The rain had stopped, but the sky outside remained a bruised purple, casting long, ominous shadows across the office. He pushed a stack of legal documents toward me. "He has done it, Evelyn," Mr. Walton said, his voice heavy with resignation. "Travis filed the petition this morning. He is asking the court for full legal guardianship over you and your estate." I stared at the paperwork. The words swam before my eyes, cold and bureaucratic, designed to strip a human being of their dignity. Petitioner Travis Marrow, respondent Evelyn Marrow. Reason: advanced cognitive decline and inability to manage personal affairs. "He is saying I am crazy," I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of rage and disbelief. "He is telling a judge that I cannot tie my own shoes just so he can rob me blind. If the judge grants this, Evelyn, you lose everything, Mr. Walton warned, leaning forward. You lose the right to access your bank accounts. You lose the right to decide where you live. You effectively become a child in the eyes of the law, and Travis becomes your parent. I will not let that happen. I snapped. I will stand in that courtroom. I will play those recordings. I will show them the bank statements. We will, Mr. Walton agreed. But there is more. While preparing for the hearing, I ran another credit check, a deep dive. He pulled out a single sheet of paper. Yesterday afternoon. A new loan was approved in your name. It is a high-interest private loan, secured against the remaining equity in your house. The amount is $150,000. I gasped, pressing a hand to my chest. 150,000. How is that even possible? I froze my credit yesterday. They used a medical override, Mr. Walton explained grimly. They submitted a physician's statement claiming you were medically incapacitated, which allows for emergency power of attorney actions. I pulled your medical file from the hospital database. He slid another folder across the desk. I opened it and felt the blood drain from my face. There were entries for appointments I had never attended. There were notes describing episodes of confusion, wandering, and aggression that had never happened. This is a lie, I whispered. I haven't seen Dr. Evans in 2 years. These dates. I was at the library on this day. I was gardening on this one. I know. Mr. Walton said. It looked suspicious to me, too. The handwriting on the intake forms didn't match the usual staff. So, I made a call. I have a friend who is a senior charge nurse at the clinic, a woman I have known since high school. I asked her to look at the digital logs to see who accessed your file to make these edits. He paused, taking a sip of water. The silence stretched, tight as a piano wire. It was a nurse named Sarah. He continued. My contact pressed her. She threatened an audit. Sarah broke down about an hour ago. Why, I asked. Why would a stranger do this to me? Because she is not a stranger to everyone. Mr. Walton said. She is Melanie's cousin? Melanie. I breathed. The name tasted like ash. But that is not the worst part. Evelyn? Mr. Walton said. Sarah didn't just do it for family loyalty. She did it because Melanie was hysterical. Apparently, Melanie is in deep. She begged Sarah, saying that if they didn't get this loan approved immediately, something terrible was going to happen. What kind of terrible, I asked. The kind involving men who break legs for a living, Mr. Walton said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. Melanie owes a lot of money to a bookie in the city. A man named Silas, who runs an underground gambling ring. She is in the hole for nearly $200,000. That is why they are so desperate. That is why they are rushing the guardianship. They aren't just greedy, Evelyn. They are terrified. I sat back in the leather chair, the revelation hitting me with the force of a physical blow. I had thought this was a domestic tragedy. I thought it was about a son who felt entitled to his mother's legacy. But it was darker than that. My son and his wife were not just thieves. They were cornered animals. And they were willing to feed me to the wolves to save themselves. So, I said, my voice steadying as the shock turned into a cold, hard clarity. Melanie has a gambling addiction, and Travis, my son, is willing to declare me insane to pay off her debts. That appears to be the reality. Mr. Walton said, this is no longer just a civil dispute. This is fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. But we have to be careful. If these people Melanie owes money to are as dangerous as I think, desperate people do desperate things. I looked at the window, where the first stars were struggling to shine through the clouds. I thought of Travis, the boy I had protected from the cold, now willing to throw me into a fire he didn't start. Let them be desperate, I said softly. I am done being the victim. If they want to drag me into their mess, they are going to find out that I am not the one who will be buried. The best way to catch a wolf is to limp. If I wanted to expose Travis and Melanie for the predators they were, I had to stop fighting them and start feeding their delusions. I spent the morning staring blankly at the television, leaving my coffee cup in the microwave, and asking Melanie the same question 3 times in 10 minutes. I watched the greedy glimmer in her eyes as she texted Travis. They thought I was finally breaking. Mum, Travis said that afternoon, his voice dripping with that sickening, fake concern. I made an appointment with a specialist, Dr. Alden. He just wants to chat with you, to make sure you are okay. Okay, I whispered, staring at my hands. If you think I should. He did not know that Dr. Alden was an old friend of Mr. Walton's from the university. He did not know that the moment we stepped into that office, a high-fidelity recording system would be active, capturing not just my answers, but Travis's sidebar commentary. In the examination room, I played my part. I hesitated on simple questions. I looked confused. Travis sat in the corner, leaning forward eagerly, when Dr. Alden stepped out to get some water, leaving us alone. Travis leaned in close. Just tell him you are tired. Mom, he hissed. Tell him you don't want to manage the bills anymore. It is too hard for you. Right, I don't know. Travis, I stammered. I think I can still. No. You can't, he snapped, his patience fraying. You are making a mess of everything? Just let me handle it. Unless you want to end up in that state facility off the highway. Is that what you want? The threat hung in the sterile air. The recording device taped under the exam table caught every syllable of his coercion. While they were celebrating their successful doctor's visit, I executed the second part of my plan. Using the secure app Mr. Walton had installed on a burner phone I kept hidden in my knitting bag, I transferred 70% of my liquid assets into a secure trust account that neither Travis nor Melanie could touch. I left just enough in the main account to keep the lights on, but not enough to pay off a gambling debt. The reaction was immediate. That evening, the atmosphere in the house shifted from triumphant to terrified. Melanie was pacing the kitchen, her phone clutched in her hand like a lifeline. I heard her whispering frantically near the pantry. He says he is coming. Travis, she sobbed, her voice trembling. He says he wants the first installment by midnight or he is going to hurt us. Travis stormed into the living room where I was pretending to read a magazine. His face was pale, sweat beading on his forehead. He held a document in his hand. It was an emergency power of attorney form. Mum, listen to me, he said, his voice breathless and erratic. There is an issue with the bank, a security breach. I need you to sign this so I can move your money to a safe account. Right now. I looked at the paper. It would give him immediate, unrestricted access to everything I owned. I looked up at him, letting my gaze clarify, dropping the mask of the confused old woman for just a second. No, I said softly. He froze. What did you say? I said no. Travis, I replied, closing the magazine. I don't think I want to sign that. You don't have a choice, he screamed, slamming his hand down on the coffee table. The mask of the dutiful son shattered completely. Sign the damn paper. Evelyn, you are senile. You are useless. If you don't sign this, I will have you declared incompetent by Monday, and I will leave you in the darkest hole of a nursing home I can find. Do you hear me? I will let you rot. Melanie rushed in, grabbing his arm. Travis, stop. She is going to shut up. He roared at her, then turned back to me, his eyes wild with the desperation of a man who owes money to dangerous people. Sign it. I sat perfectly still, my heart pounding, but not from fear. I was terrified of his violence. Yes. But I felt a strange, cold satisfaction. The recorder I had activated in my pocket was running. I had the medical coercion. I had the financial trail. And now, I had the direct threat. I am going to bed. Travis, I said, standing up. And I am not signing anything. I walked past him, expecting a blow that never came. He was too stunned by my sudden defiance. As I climbed the stairs, I heard him kick the furniture and scream a curse word that shook the walls. He thought he was losing control of his mother. He had no idea that he had just handed me the keys to his cell. The courtroom in the county courthouse was oppressive, with its high ceilings and wood-panelled walls that seemed to absorb all the light. I sat next to Mr. Walton, my hands folded neatly in my lap, watching my son perform the greatest act of his life. Travis stood at the podium, his suit perfectly pressed, his face a mask of pained concern. He told the judge about my supposed lapses in memory. He described incidents that never happened, painting a picture of a woman who was a danger to herself. It breaks my heart. Your Honor, Travis said, his voice catching theatrically. But Mom just isn't. She isn't there anymore. She leaves the gas on. She forgets who I am. I just want to keep her safe. Judge Vance, a stern man with wire-rimmed glasses, nodded sympathetically. He looked at me with pity. For a moment, it seemed as though Travis had won. He looked back at me, a tiny, triumphant smirk playing on his lips. Then Mr. Walton stood up. He did not look at Travis. He looked directly at the judge. Your Honor, Mr. Walton said, his voice booming in the quiet room. Before you rule on Mrs. Marrow's competency, I would like to submit several pieces of evidence that contradict the petitioner's claims. Specifically, I have a sworn affidavit from a nurse named Sarah regarding the falsification of medical records, and a digital recording taken 3 days ago. Travis's smirk vanished. Melanie, sitting in the gallery behind him, went rigid. Mr. Walton pressed a button on his laptop, and the audio echoed through the courtroom. It was the recording from the night Travis demanded I sign the power of attorney. The judge's expression shifted from boredom to shock as Travis's voice filled the room. Loud and clear. I will have you declared incompetent by Monday, and I will leave you in the darkest hole of a nursing home I can find. The silence that followed was deafening. Judge Vance stared at Travis. The pity was gone, replaced by a cold, hard glare. Mr. Marrow, the judge said, his voice dangerously low. Care to explain why your concern for your mother sounds remarkably like a threat? Travis opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at Mr. Walton, then at me, his eyes wide with panic. I stood up. My legs felt strong. I smoothed my skirt and looked the judge in the eye. I am not confused, Your Honor, I said clearly, and I do not have dementia. What I have is a son who forged my signature on a credit card application and took out a $150,000 loan against my home without my knowledge. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. I turned to look at Travis, who was now sweating profusely. They did not do this because I am sick, I continued, pointing a steady finger at the couple. They did this because Melanie owes nearly $200,000 to illegal gambling operators, and they decided my life was the price for their mistakes. Melanie, the judge asked, looking over his spectacles at my daughter-in-law. Melanie let out a strangled sob and covered her face with her hands. The sudden attention broke her. She slumped forward, shaking violently. Travis looked at his wife, and in that moment, the final twist occurred. The united front they had presented the loving couple caring for the aging mother disintegrated instantly. It was her. Travis screamed, pointing a shaking finger at Melanie. She made me do it. She is the one with the debt. She told me we had to do it, or they would kill us. I didn't want to hurt my mum. You liar! Melanie shrieked, jumping to her feet. You said she was just an old cash cow. You said she wouldn't notice. Order Judge Vance shouted, banging his gavel. Order in this court, but the damage was done. They had torn each other apart in front of everyone. The judge looked at Travis with undisguised disgust. The petition for guardianship is denied with prejudice, Judge Vance declared. Furthermore, given the evidence of fraud, forgery, and elder abuse presented here, I am holding both of you in contempt and referring this matter immediately to the District Attorney for Criminal Investigation. Melanie panicked. She bolted toward the double doors at the back of the courtroom, her high heels clacking frantically against the floor. Stop her, the bailiff shouted. 2 officers intercepted her before she could reach the exit. She collapsed into their arms, wailing. Travis stood alone at the podium, looking at the handcuffs the bailiff was pulling from his belt. He looked at me one last time, his eyes pleading, but I turned my face away. He had dug this grave with his own hands, and now he had to lie in it. The silence in the house was no longer heavy. For the first time in months, the air felt light, circulating through the rooms like a fresh breeze off the ocean. I walked through the front door, not as a victim or a guardian, but as the sole owner of my life. The ghosts of my son's betrayal still lingered in the corners, but they were fading, stripped of their power by the gavel of a judge. I spent the first week reclaiming my space. I stripped the guest room bed where Travis and Melanie had slept, burning the sheets in the backyard fire pit. It was a symbolic act, perhaps a bit dramatic, but watching the smoke rise into the grey sky felt like an exorcism. I repainted the walls a soft yellow, covering the sterile grey Melanie had insisted upon on Tuesday morning. I was struggling to move a heavy box of old magazines to the curb when a voice called out from the sidewalk. You are going to hurt your back, pulling that. Evelyn, Mrs. Donahue said. She was a widow who lived 3 houses down, a woman I had exchanged polite nods with for decades but never truly known. She marched up the driveway, her floral gardening gloves still on. Here, grab that end. Oh, you don't have to do that. Mrs. Donahue, I said, wiping sweat from my forehead. It is quite heavy. Nonsense, she replied, gripping the cardboard. And call me Beatrice. We are too old for formalities. Together, we heaved the box to the street. That small act of kindness broke something open inside me. We sat on my porch afterwards, drinking iced tea, watching the seagulls circle overhead. We talked for 3 hours. We talked about lost husbands, about the ache in our joints when it rained, and about the children who grow up to be strangers. It takes a lot of courage, Beatrice said, looking at me over the rim of her glass. To do what you did. Most people would have just let it happen. I almost did, I admitted softly. But I realized that love isn't supposed to be a suicide pact. Learning to love myself was harder than the legal battle. For 58 years, I had defined myself by who I served my husband, my son, my job. Now, I had to define myself by who I was. I started taking long walks on the beach at 6 a.m. I bought expensive ingredients and cooked elaborate meals just for myself, savoring every bite without worrying if anyone else liked it. A month after the trial, I went back to Mr. Walton's office. The atmosphere was different this time. There was no urgency, no fear. I am ready to sign the new will, I told him. He slid the document across the desk. I read it carefully. The name Travis Marrow did not appear a single time. There were no trusts for grandchildren who would never visit, no safety nets for a son who had tried to trap me. The entire estate. Mr. Walton read aloud, to confirm, to be liquidated and donated to the National Coalition for Elderly Financial Abuse Prevention. Yes, I said, signing my name with a steady hand. I want my legacy to protect women who didn't see the knife coming until it was in their back. Before I left, I handed Mr. Walton a sealed letter. Please have this delivered to him. I said, to the prison. I don't want to visit. I don't want to see him through glass. I knew what I had written by heart. I had spent 3 nights drafting it, crying until there were no tears left, distilling my grief into clarity. Travis, I spent my life trying to give you the world, thinking that if I filled your hands with enough love, you would never need to take anything from anyone else. I was wrong. You looked at my kindness and saw weakness. You looked at your mother and saw a bank account. I do not hate you. Hate takes too much energy, and I am done spending my energy on you, but I cannot be your mother anymore. When you viewed me as a target, I was forced to become my own defender. I hope one day you understand that I did not ruin you. I simply refused to let you ruin me. Goodbye. That evening, I sat by the bay window overlooking the cliffs of Greybridge Haven. The sun was setting, painting the water in strokes of violet and gold. The ocean looked vast and indifferent, beautiful in its power. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the salty air. I was alone, but for the first time in my life, I was not lonely. I realized then that severing the tie with my own blood was the most painful thing I had ever done. But it was also the only way to keep my heart beating. I was scarred. Yes, but I was still standing. And as the lighthouse began its rhythmic sweep across the darkening water, I knew I was finally, truly home. I thought the storm had passed, but the final thunderclap struck on a Tuesday evening, just as I was settling into the quiet rhythm of my new life. I was sitting by the fire with a book when the phone rang. It was Mr. Walton, and the moment I heard his breath on the other end of the line, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Evelyn, listen to me very carefully. Mr. Walton said, his voice tight and urgent. Do not open your door to anyone. Not anyone. I have already called the police. They are on their way. What is it? I asked, gripping the receiver. Has Travis escaped? No, he replied. But the man Melanie owes money to. Silas. We intercepted a communication. He is looking for you. Travis. That foolish boy told Silas that you would cover the debt. He promised him your assets as collateral. My blood ran cold, even from a jail cell or a holding room, or wherever he was pending trial. My son was still trying to sell me to save his own skin. He had painted a target on my back to keep the wolves away from his. They are coming to force you to pay what Travis promised. Walton continued. Stay inside. Lock the deadbolt. 10 minutes later. The silent street of Greybridge Haven was bathed in the chaotic strobe of red and blue lights. I watched from the window as police cruisers swarmed the cul-de-sac. They intercepted a black sedan parked 2 houses down. I saw men in handcuffs being led away. The threat was neutralized before it could even knock on my door. But the real horror came an hour later. A detective sat in my living room, holding a tablet. He looked tired, the kind of exhaustion that comes from seeing too much of the darkness in people. We found something on Travis's phone. Mrs. Marrow, the detective said gently. He wasn't just trying to take your house. We found recordings. He was negotiating to sell your identity, your social security number, your credit profiles, to a ring of identity thieves. He was going to strip you of everything, down to your name. I felt a wave of nausea, but the detective held up a hand. There is more. We interviewed Melanie again tonight. She broke down completely. She is just as guilty. I said bitterly. She is guilty. The detective agreed, but she claims, and the evidence supports her, that she didn't start gambling on her own. Travis introduced her to the bookies. He encouraged it. He pushed her into debt intentionally. I stared at him, unable to comprehend the level of malice. Why? Why would he ruin his own wife, Leverage? The detective said. He needed her desperate. He needed her to be terrified enough to agree to the guardianship plan. He manufactured her crisis so he could use it to justify taking your money. He has been the architect of this entire nightmare from day one. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Travis was not just a greedy son. He was a monster who had manipulated everyone around him, his wife, his mother, the courts like pieces on a chessboard, the boy I had raised, who I had protected from the cold winters of Wisconsin, had grown into a man capable of calculated destruction. The news that night showed footage of Travis being transferred to a maximum security facility. He looked haggard, his arrogance finally stripped away by the cold reality of a federal indictment. He was facing charges of fraud, conspiracy, elder abuse, and racketeering. I watched his face on the screen, the face that used to smile at me over birthday cakes, and waited for the tears to come. But they did not come. Instead, a profound sense of calm settled over the room. I was not happy, but I was free. The cord was cut. The danger was gone. I picked up the remote and turned off the television. The screen went black, erasing his face from my living room. I walked to the window and looked out at the ocean, dark and rhythmic under the moonlight. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the clean, salt air. Justice is not revenge, I whispered to the reflection in the glass. Justice is living on without having to fear anything anymore. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It was a difficult journey, but sharing it makes me feel like I have a whole new family watching over me. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please drop a comment below and tell me your city or country so we can connect. If you enjoyed this story and want to support me, please subscribe to the channel Grandma's Family Diary, hit that like button, and smash the hype button so more people can hear this story. Stay safe and take care of yourselves.